You ever have one of those nights that starts out totally normal, maybe even boring, and then suddenly takes this sharp left turn into something you never saw coming? Yeah, that was last Friday for me. I was just hanging out with a few friends, nothing fancy, just a casual get-together at Jake's apartment. And honestly, I thought the most exciting thing that was going to happen was me finally beating him at Mario Kart. Spoiler, didn't happen. So there we were, me, Jake, and a couple of other guys from our group, all spread out on the floor and couches, some snacks in the middle, you know the drill. The vibe was easy, low-key. Nothing was off limits, but no one was really pushing boundaries either. Then Jake, who's always been the most unpredictable one in the circle, suggested we play Truth or Dare. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, it's kind of a classic for nights like these, right? Just some harmless fun to break the ice and get a few laughs. Jake's this guy who's got this weird mix of charm and mischief. Tall, dark hair that's always a little messy. These sharp blue eyes that somehow make you feel like you're either in on a secret or about to be pranked. I had known him for a couple of months through mutual friends, and honestly, I was still figuring him out. He's funny, clever, always pushing people's buttons in the best way. But there was something about him I couldn't quite put my finger on, like he was holding back a side of himself, just waiting for the right moment to show it. Anyway, we started the game, and at first it was all typical stuff. Share embarrassing stories, do a silly dance, that kind of thing. I was laughing, having a good time, feeling that easy kind of connection you sometimes get when you're just being yourself around people who don't judge you. Then it got to Jake's turn, and when it was my turn to ask him, I went with a dare, thinking I'd keep things light and fun. But when it came back around to me, Jake's dare was different. It wasn't the usual dares you hear in these games. It felt calculated, like he was testing something that caught me off guard. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting, but then the dare wasn't just a little wild. It crossed a line. And suddenly, the whole room felt tense, like the air had thickened, and everyone was waiting to see how I was going to respond. I looked at Jake, and those blue eyes were intense, serious in a way I hadn't seen before. That's when I realized this wasn't just a game anymore. It was something else entirely. And I was right in the middle of it, whether I liked it or not. I felt my heart start to pound, like it was suddenly doing a sprint in my chest. The room was quieter than before, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see how I'd react. Jake leaned back a little, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. Intense, expectant. "All right, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's the dare?" He shrugged, still grinning, but there was this edge to it. A challenge, almost. "I dare you to kiss me." It was like someone dropped a bucket of cold water on me. Kiss him? Like, really kiss him? And here, in front of everyone? My mind was racing. Jake and I had hung out a lot. Sure, we'd joked and teased each other, and I won't lie, I'd caught myself watching him more than a few times. But this was new territory. The people around us started chuckling, some nudging each other, probably thinking it was just part of the game. But for me, everything went silent for a second. I glanced at Jake again. His eyes weren't teasing now. They were almost vulnerable, like he'd been waiting to see if I'd take the chance. I swallowed hard. "You're serious?" "Yeah, man," he said, shrugging once more, still smiling, but without that usual playful tooliness. Truth or dare, remember? You can say no if you want. But the way he said it made me feel like he wanted me to say yes. Like this wasn't just some silly game for him. And the thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Maybe it wasn't just a game for me either. My friends were watching, waiting. I could feel every eye in the room on us, but honestly, I barely heard them. My brain was scrambling through a million what-ifs. What if I kissed him and it was a disaster? What if it was amazing? What if it changed everything? I looked back up, and without thinking too hard, I nodded. "Okay." Jake's smile widened, and the tension in the room broke, replaced by a ripple of surprised laughter and whispers. I stood up, feeling more exposed than I expected. Jake met me halfway, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, like we were both trying to figure out what this kiss meant before it even happened. Then, it did. The kiss was quick at first, awkward, uncertain, but then it shifted. It felt like electricity, like something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. I could taste the faint hint of his cologne, feel the warmth of his skin under mine. When we pulled away, I caught my breath. "Wow," Jake said softly, grinning like he'd just won something. That was better than I expected. My friends whooped and cheered, making it feel like a scene out of some cheesy movie. But for me, it was real. It was raw. And I couldn't stop smiling. After that, the game lost its usual edge. Dares got sillier, truths got more open, but something had shifted between me and Jake. Whenever our eyes met, there was this unspoken understanding that wasn't there before. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Jake and I were the last ones left. We sat on the couch, the quiet buzz of the city outside the window, filling the space between us. I felt like I should say something smart or profound, but all I could manage was, "So that was unexpected." He laughed, this genuine, easy laugh that made his whole face light up. "Yeah, I guess I wanted to know if you felt the same way." "Felt the same way about what?" He looked at me then. Really looked, like he was searching for something. "About all this. About me. About us." I swallowed, my heart doing that sprint again. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. But I'm glad I didn't back out. Jake nodded, his gaze soft. Me too. That night, as I walked home, my mind kept replaying that moment. The way his lips felt on mine, the look in his eyes. It wasn't just a dare anymore. It was the start of something I wasn't quite ready to name, but I knew deep down it was real. I still don't know where this is going, and maybe that's the scary part. But sometimes, the best things come from the moments you least expect. And, for once, I was ready to take the leap, even if it all started with a dare that went way too far. The next day I woke up with this strange mix of excitement and nervousness buzzing in my chest. I kept replaying the night's events in my head, especially that kiss. It felt surreal, like it belonged to some alternate universe where I was braver, more spontaneous. Honestly, part of me wondered if I'd imagined it all, but my face still tingled from the memory, so I knew it was real. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it right away, but I couldn't help checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for a text from Jake. Which, of course, made me look like a total dork. Eventually I got one. "Hey, about last night. Not trying to be weird, but I really meant what I said. Want to meet up later?" My heart did this weird little flip. I typed back, "Yeah, I'd like that." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, this small place with way too many indie posters on the walls and an espresso machine that sounded like it was about to explode. I got there early, nervously twisting my coffee cup in my hands, wondering how this conversation would go. Jake showed up with that easy grin, the same messy hair, and those eyes that somehow made me feel both exposed and safe at the same time. He slid into the seat across from me, and for a beat, neither of us said anything. So, he finally broke the silence. "You still think I'm a weirdo for daring you to kiss me?" I laughed, a little breathless. "Maybe, but I'm starting to think you were just bold enough to say what neither of us wanted to admit." He smirked and leaned back. "Yeah? And what's that?" "That I was into you two." Jake's expression softened, and I felt a rush of warmth spread through me. Good to know I wasn't the only one who was freaking out after that. We talked for hours about stupid things, deep things, and everything in between. I learned about his messy past relationships, the fact that he'd struggled with being open about who he was for years, and I told him about my own tangled history, the times I'd hidden my feelings, because I was scared of what people might think. It was the most honest conversation I'd had in a long time. By the end of the night, we were sitting on a bench outside the coffee shop, the streetlights flickering above us. Jake reached out, took my hand in his, and I didn't pull away. It felt like the natural next step, like all the hesitation and fear had suddenly melted. "I'm glad you didn't back out last night," he said quietly. "Me too," I admitted. For the next few weeks, things between us unfolded in this slow, unpredictable way. We weren't rushing into anything. We were just exploring, testing the waters. Sometimes it was awkward, like the time I accidentally called him dude during our first proper date. Other times, it was effortless, like when we'd spend hours wandering the city, talking about everything and nothing, making each other laugh until our sides hurt. But there were moments when I caught Jake staring at me with this intensity that made me wonder if he was fighting his own doubts. One night, after a late dinner, we sat on his balcony, the city lights sprawling beneath us. He turned to me, voice low and serious. "Do you ever wonder if this is too fast? Or maybe if we're just fooling ourselves?" I looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability. "I think about it, but then I realized that I don't want to miss out because I'm scared." He smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Yeah, me too. It wasn't always easy." Our circle of friends was pretty accepting, but I could tell Jake was still wary of how some people might react if they knew. And honestly, sometimes I caught myself hesitating to be fully open too, afraid of what it might mean for me, for us. But every time I saw him, every time we touched or laughed or just shared a quiet moment, those fears faded a little. One afternoon, a few weeks after the coffee shop chat, I invited Jake over to my place. I'd cooked this ridiculous pasta dish that was more of an experiment than a meal, but it felt like the perfect excuse to have him close. We ate, drank cheap wine, and then ended up sprawled on the couch, tangled together under a blanket. I looked at him and felt this overwhelming urge to say something important, even though I wasn't sure I had the right words. "Jake," I started, voice a little shaky. "Last week, when you asked if we were fooling ourselves, I don't think we are. I think it's real, and I want to see where it goes. Even if it's scary." He smiled, eyes shining with something that felt like relief and hope all at once. "I want that too." At that moment, with the city humming softly outside and Jake's hand warm in mine, I knew that dare had been more than a game. It had been the beginning of something unexpected, messy, and beautiful. And for once, I was ready to see it through, no matter where it led. After that night on the couch, things between Jake and me started feeling less like a secret and more like, I don't know, something real. We didn't announce anything to the world right away. We weren't those guys who plastered their relationship all over social media or made a big deal out of every milestone. It was more subtle than that. A glance here, a touch there, little moments where I'd catch him watching me and feel this quiet kind of happiness settle in my chest. But even though it felt natural, it wasn't always easy. Jake was still cautious, and sometimes I could tell he was wrestling with his own fears. Like the night we went to this party thrown by some of our mutual friends. Everyone was there, the usual crowd, and I could feel Jake tense up as soon as we walked in. It was nothing new. He'd never been the type to be super open about his personal life, but that night, the weight of it all pressed down on him in a way I hadn't seen before. We stood near the kitchen, and I noticed him scanning the room like he was looking for an escape hatch. I reached out, squeezed his hand gently. "Hey, you okay?" He gave me a half smile but didn't say anything right away. Then, quietly, he admitted, "I'm just not sure if they all know, or if they'd be cool with it." I nodded, understanding exactly where he was coming from. Even though I'd been lucky with mostly supportive friends, the idea of bringing someone like Jake into my world, completely and openly, felt intimidating too. Before I could answer, one of our friends came over, clearly sensing the tension. "Hey, you two look cute. What's new?" Jake glanced at me, then back at our friend. "Nothing much," he said, voice low. I decided to break the ice. "Actually, we've been dating for a few weeks." There it was, out in the open. Our friend's face lit up, surprise quickly turning into a smile. "That's awesome. You guys are great together." The relief on Jake's face was like a weight lifting off his shoulders. After that, the night felt a little easier, like we'd crossed some invisible line together. But outside our little bubble, life wasn't always that straightforward. I started noticing how Jake would sometimes pull away when things got too intense, even when it wasn't about our relationship. He'd get moody or quiet, and I could see the frustration behind those sharp glances and clipped answers. One evening, we were sitting in my apartment, watching some terrible action movie because neither of us could pick anything good. Jake was unusually silent, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. I finally asked, "Hey, what's going on? You've been kind of distant lately." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. It's like, I want to be close to you, but I'm scared of what that means, of what people might think. And sometimes, I worry I'm not ready to fully let someone in." I reached over and took his hand. "Jake, I get that. I've been there too, but you don't have to go through it alone." He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the cracks behind his tough exterior. "Thanks. That means a lot." From that moment on, I realized how important patience was going to be. Jake wasn't just someone I was dating. He was someone who'd been through so much, carrying scars I hadn't seen before. And if I wanted this to work, I had to be willing to give him the space to heal. Our conversations got more honest after that. We talked about fears, hopes, and the messy parts of being vulnerable. I shared stories from my past too, the times I'd hidden who I was, the moments I'd wished for someone to just see me and accept me fully. There was this one night, a couple of weeks after that talk, when we were lying in bed, the city lights casting a soft glow through the blinds. Jake turned to me and said, "I'm scared, but I'm also tired of pretending. I want to try, for real this time." I smiled, feeling the swell of affection. Me too. Then, in the quiet dark, we made this promise. Not with words, really, but in the way we held each other, the way our fingers intertwined, and the gentle trust that finally started to grow between us. Things didn't magically become perfect overnight. There were still moments of doubt and hesitation. But every time Jake looked at me with those honest eyes, I knew we were building something that could last. One afternoon, about a month after that, we decided to go for a walk in the park near my place. It was one of those perfect spring days, the kind where the sun hits just right and the air smells like fresh grass and possibility. We found a bench under a big oak tree and sat down, watching kids play and couples stroll by. Jake nudged me playfully. "Remember when I dared you to kiss me? I wasn't just messing around." I laughed. "Yeah, I remember. That dare changed everything." He shrugged, looking a little bashful. "Good, because I've been thinking about that moment a lot, how it led us here." I squeezed his hand. "Me too." And just like that, I realized that sometimes the moments that start as a joke or a game can turn into the most meaningful parts of your life. Jake wasn't just the guy that first kissed on a dare. He was becoming the person I wanted to share everything with, the one who made the scary parts of opening up feel a little less daunting. As we sat there, watching the world go by, I felt hopeful. Because even if the path ahead was uncertain, I wasn't walking it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. That walk in the park felt like a turning point. The kind of day you want to bottle up and keep for when life feels messy or uncertain. Jake and I fell into this easy rhythm, talking about everything and nothing as we wandered beneath the trees. I remember him nudging me as he told this ridiculous story about a barista who'd refused to believe he was ordering a, quote, regular black coffee. We laughed so hard we had tears in our eyes, and for a moment, all the worries and doubts felt miles away. But, of course, life doesn't just hand you moments like that on a silver platter without stirring up a little chaos somewhere else. A few days later, I got a text from Jake that was simple but heavy. "Can we talk?" "It's about us." My heart sank for a second. That sort of message always sets off alarms in your brain, right? I stared at it for a solid minute, trying to guess what he meant. Was he having second thoughts? Did something happen I didn't know about? We met up at his place that evening. He looked tired, a little more worn than usual. We sat down on his couch, and for a while there was just this awkward silence. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he started, voice low. "And I realized that while I want this, us, I'm also scared about what comes next. Not just with friends or family, but with myself. I've built up walls for so long. Sometimes I wonder if I can really let them down completely." I nodded, wanting to say the right thing, but not sure what that was. "I get that. It's hard to be vulnerable. especially if you've been hurt before. Jake smiled faintly. Exactly. And I don't want to mess this up. I want to be with you, but I need time. I reached out and took his hand, feeling the tension in his fingers. Time makes sense. We'll figure it out together at your pace. He looked relieved, like a burden had been lifted. Thanks for being patient with me. That conversation didn't magically fix everything, of course, but it opened a door for honesty that wasn't there before. After that, we started talking more openly about our fears, our histories, the parts we usually kept hidden. One night, a couple of weeks later, we were lying in bed, the room bathed in soft light from my bedside lamp. Jake was unusually quiet, and I could tell something was on his mind. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything, I replied. Have you ever been scared that loving someone might mean losing yourself? The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. Yeah. Especially in past relationships, I've worried about that. Like I'd have to change who I am to make it work. Jake nodded slowly. Same here. But with you, it's different. I don't want to lose myself. I want to find someone I can be myself with. I smiled. The way his words wrapped around me felt like a safe place. That's what this should be. Finding, not losing. He reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, that small touch making my heart skip. I'm glad we're figuring this out. It was moments like that that made all the uncertainty worth it. But life doesn't pause while you're figuring things out. A couple of weeks later, I found myself in a situation that put everything we'd built to the test. Jake and I had been invited to this weekend getaway with our friend group. A cabin upstate, the kind of place with creaky floorboards and no cell service. It was supposed to be fun, a break from the city and the noise in our heads. Everything was going fine until the second night, when one of our friends accidentally let slip that they'd heard rumors about Jake's past. Things he hadn't shared with most people, things he clearly wasn't ready to talk about. I saw Jake freeze right then and there, his smile faltering as the words hung in the air. Later, when everyone else had gone outside for a late-night bonfire, I found him sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the dark woods. I sat down beside him, the cold wood pressing against my back. Want to talk about it? He shook his head. No, it's messy. I don't want to drag you into it. I turned to face him. Jake, I'm already in it. We're in this together. He looked at me then, vulnerability shining through his usual guardedness. It's just some things from my past I've never dealt with. And sometimes I worry it'll scare you away. I pulled him into a hug. Nothing you've been through changes how I feel about you. He didn't say anything, just rested his head against my shoulder. In that quiet moment, I realized that love isn't always easy or clean. Sometimes it's about showing up even when things are messy, about holding on when the past comes knocking. The next morning, Jake was quieter than usual, but when we looked at each other, there was this unspoken promise, a promise to face whatever came next together. And honestly, that's when I knew, dare or no dare, game or no game, this was real. It was complicated, sometimes scary, but it was ours. I'm still learning what that means every day. But if I'm honest, I wouldn't have it any other way. The days after that weekend upstate were, if I'm being honest, some of the most intense I've ever lived through. Jake's past wasn't some vague shadow anymore. It was something real, something that had settled into the quiet corners of our relationship. But instead of pushing him away, it made me want to be there more, even if it meant wading through the uncomfortable parts. One night, a few days after we got back, Jake and I were sitting on the edge of my bed, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows. He looked tired, both physically and emotionally, like he'd been holding so much inside that finally letting it out felt like bleeding. You ever feel like you're carrying around things no one else can see? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded because, yeah, I knew that feeling all too well. All the time. He took a shaky breath. I want to tell you about my past, the stuff I've been hiding, but I'm scared it'll change how you see me. I reached out, grabbing his hands, holding them tight. Jake, no matter what, I'm not going anywhere, but only if you want to share. He looked into my eyes for a long minute, and then, like a dam breaking, he started talking. About heartbreaks that cut deep, about family struggles, about the times he felt so lost that the world seemed too heavy to carry. There were pauses, moments where he'd look away or struggle for words, but he kept going. Listening to him, I realized how much courage it took for Jake to open up like that. And as he spoke, I felt this fierce protectiveness, mixed with admiration for his strength. When he finally stopped, the room felt heavy with silence, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that settles after a storm when everything's been washed clean. "I'm sorry if I dumped all that on you," he said, voice cracking a little. I shook my head, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Don't apologize. I want to know all of you, even the messy parts." He smiled, a little fragile but genuine. "Thank you. That means more than you know." From that night on, something changed between us. The walls Jake had built started to crumble, slowly but surely, and I felt like I was finally seeing the real him. The parts he'd kept hidden not because he didn't trust me, but because he'd learned early on that the world could be cruel, and I wanted to be the one who proved that he didn't have to be afraid anymore. But life, as it tends to do, threw another curveball our way. About a month later, I was at work when I got a call from Jake. His voice was shaky, something I'd never heard before. "Hey, can you come over? I really need you." My stomach dropped. I left work early, heart hammering, and when I got to his place, I found him sitting on the couch, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling slightly. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting beside him, pulling him into a hug. He pulled away just enough to look at me, voice barely audible. "I ran into someone from my past, someone I thought I'd never have to see again." I waited for him to continue, but he looked away, like the words were too heavy. Finally, I pressed gently. "You can tell me." He swallowed hard. "It's complicated. That person, they hurt me. A lot. And seeing them again brought everything back." I felt a mix of anger and sadness bubbling up inside me. "Do you want me to stay? Or give you space?" He shook his head quickly. "Stay, please." So I did. We spent the evening wrapped up in each other, me holding him while he let the tears fall. It was raw and messy and real. I hated that he had to go through it, but I was grateful he trusted me enough to let me in. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Jake had good days and bad days. Sometimes he'd pull back, other times he'd cling close. I learned to navigate the shifting tides, doing my best to be patient and supportive without losing myself. One night, after a particularly tough day, we were lying in bed, and I could see the exhaustion written all over his face. "I don't want to be defined by my past," he whispered. "You're not," I assured him, brushing a hand over his cheek. "You're defined by who you are now and who you want to be." He looked at me, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever." We kissed then, slow and tender, like a promise. And in that moment, I knew that love wasn't just the easy parts, the laughter, the butterflies, but the willingness to stand together when things got hard. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship grew stronger, built on trust, honesty, and the messy, beautiful reality of two people choosing each other every day. One afternoon, we were sitting in a small park near my place, sharing a sandwich and watching the world go by. Jake turned to me, this quiet smile on his face. "You know," he said, "I never thought a stupid game of truth or dare would lead me here." I laughed. "Yeah, me neither." He took my hand in his, "But I'm glad it did." "Me too," I said, squeezing his hand back. And as we sat there, the sun warming our skin and the city humming around us, I realized that sometimes the best things in life come from moments you least expect and from the courage to say yes, even when the dare seems too big to take on. There's something about reaching a place where all the messy pieces start to fit together, even if imperfectly. For Jake and me, it wasn't a sudden, grand moment, but a quiet one, a moment that didn't need fireworks or a big gesture to feel meaningful. It happened one evening, a few months after that park day. We'd decided to cook dinner together at my place, a simple thing we'd started doing more often. Jake was chopping vegetables with his usual focused expression, and I was ruining the pasta, as usual. We laughed about my almost edible cooking and leaned on each other, the kind of comfortable closeness that only grows when you've been through the ups and downs together. After dinner, we settled onto the couch, the soft hum of the city outside, mixing with the calm inside. Jake reached over, took my hand and held it like he never wanted to let go. I looked at him, really looked. The way the light caught the edges of his face, the softness in his eyes that had grown over time. He said quietly, "I used to be scared of what love meant, what it could take from me. But with you, it feels different. Like maybe love isn't about losing yourself, but finding someone who makes you want to be better." My chest tightened, the kind of feeling you get when you realize something true and tender all at once. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's exactly how I feel." We sat there for a while, no need for more words. Just the two of us, comfortable in the silence, connected in a way that didn't need explanation. Looking back now, I see that dare, the one that caught me off guard, wasn't really about a kiss. It was about courage. The courage to be vulnerable, to take a chance, to open up when it felt safer to close off. And somehow, that single moment cracked open the door to everything that followed. Jake and I aren't perfect. We still have doubts, and sometimes the past sneaks in when we least expect it. But we face it together now, and that makes all the difference. So if there's one thing I've learned from this whole journey, it's that love doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to be real. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the shared smiles, the gentle touch, the simple truth of someone saying, "I'm here." And in the end, that's more than enough.